Hello again, biologists. Mr. Kinnear here with another video lesson for National 5 Biology. We're on Unit 1 Cell Biology, and today we're looking at active transport. So this is the fourth and final video lesson for transport across cell membranes, Key Area 1.2. So we've looked at the structure, we've looked at passive transport, and we've also looked at osmosis. Today we're going to look at active transport. So it's Key Area 1.2F effectively, and we're looking at other ways molecules can pass across a membrane, so active transport. So that's molecules and ions which are going against the concentration gradient. In the last couple of video lessons, we've looked at diffusion and osmosis, and the molecules move in the direction of high concentration to low concentration. That is down a concentration gradient. And what it will do is it will find an equilibrium, so equal concentrations on both sides in the end. Is energy needed? Hopefully you should be saying no. And the analogy I make is that if you're at the top of this hill on a bike, do you require energy to get to the bottom? Well, no. You just take your feet off the pedal, hand off the brakes, and you will go down the gradient and get to the bottom. Active transport is a different situation, however. And in this analogy, we're talking about this guy at the bottom of the hill. If he wants to go to the pool, he's going to have to invest energy to get to the top, to go from low to high. And that's what active transport is. It's the movement of molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. So that's against a concentration gradient. That's like this guy going from the bottom of the hill to the top, or you putting something onto a high shelf. It requires energy to move from low to high. And here's a video animation of active transport in operation. So we've got low concentration on the left-hand side, high concentration of sugar on the right-hand side. And those membrane proteins are pumping that sugar molecule from left to right, from low to high, and that's costing it energy. So these carrier proteins, they can often be referred to as pumps, are actively transporting the sugar molecules from low concentration on the left to high concentration on the right at the cost of energy. And that's why we link this to the structure of membranes. So you can see in that diagram the phospholipid bilayer, so those green phospholipids, and those carrier proteins or pumps that are doing the job of active transport. So here's some examples of active transport. The first one being absorption of glucose in your small intestine. Now, if you remember from your S3 biology, obviously when you eat food, it goes through your stomach, then eventually into your small intestine, and that's when you're going to absorb that glucose into your blood supply. Now, normally that will go from high concentration inside your small intestine to low concentration in your blood. However, there are some times when there is a high concentration of glucose in your blood. So that means that your body has to invest energy to pump that glucose from your small intestine into your blood so it doesn't lose any, because there may be some points in life where we don't have enough glucose from our food, so we want to make sure we get everything we can from the digestive process. And this is one of the reasons why your body needs to manage the blood glucose levels, which you might again remember from S3, but we'll also talk about it again in Unit 2, multicellular organisms. So that's active transport, pumping glucose from your small intestine against the concentration gradient when you have high glucose levels in your blood. Another example is the uptake of ions by root hair cells in plants. You'd be familiar with the fact that roots are there to take in water to allow the plant to grow, but they also take in useful ions, which are found in lower concentration in soil water compared to the root hair cells themselves. So the plants employ active transport, so the use of energy to move those useful ions from that low concentration in the soil water to high concentration in the root hair cells. So again, that's a kind of question that can come up in National 5 tests and exams, looking at the concentration of ions both inside compared to outside the cell. Another example of active transport is in your brain. Your brain contains around 85 billion nerve cells, and you should know that those communicate by electrical impulses. Those electrical impulses are reliant on the right concentrations of sodium and potassium inside and outside of your cells. That therefore requires a sodium potassium pump, which move those ions across a cell membrane from low concentration to high concentration. And around about 20% of your daily energy intake keeps your nerve cells operational. If those concentration gradients slip, then that could impact on the quality and the speed of your nerve impulses. So obviously that's a big impact that can have in terms of your thinking, your mobility, your coordination, all of those kind of things. So we're going to look at that sodium potassium pump and how it works. So here we have a sodium potassium pump sitting within a phospholipid bilayer. Blue indicates outside the cell, whereas our orangey yellow indicates inside the cell. And we have sodium ions Na+ sitting inside the cell, which are going to join with our sodium potassium pump along with ATP. ATP being an energy currency. So that's something we're going to look at a bit more when it comes to respiration later on in this unit. But it is the energy that cells use to drive things like active transport and this sodium potassium pump. This combination of sodium ions and ATP combining with the potassium pump causes a change in shape, and you can see that our sodium ions are now moved up here, and we also now have a binding site available for the potassium ions, our K+ ions, which are hovering around on the outside of the cell. So here we have our sodium ions moving out and our potassium ions binding to our sodium potassium pump. So as you can see now, our phosphate group, which is denoted by our ATP, has moved away, changing the shape again of our sodium potassium pump and allowing the potassium ions to move inside the cell. So ATP, our energy, has been used to change the shape of the sodium potassium pump, allowing us to push sodium out of the cell and potassium into the cell, both against a concentration gradient. So from low concentration to high concentration, and that allows our nerve cells to continue firing, keep going with those impulse generations to make us move, think, etc. And just as a final thought today, we're linking this back to Key Area 1.2 cell structure, thinking about the organelles within animal, plant, fungal, bacterial cells. If a cell has to undertake lots of active transport, which requires energy, what cell structure will it require? Now hopefully you're thinking it's mitochondrion or mitochondria. Probably will be lots of mitochondria, which is the plural. So mitochondria are the site of aerobic respiration and therefore energy production within your cells. So this is a common question that comes up in National 5, linking cell structure knowledge to active transport. So if a cell requires to conduct lots of active transport, then it will require lots of mitochondria. So your nerve cells, the root hair cells that we've talked about, they will require lots of mitochondria to generate the energy required for this active transport. That then completes our learning for today. What we've talked about is active transport requires energy, and that comes from aerobic respiration and therefore it requires mitochondria. We've also said that membrane proteins move molecules and ions against a concentration gradient. So those membrane proteins are often referred to as pumps, and against the concentration gradient means from low to high, just as those steps indicate. And examples of active transport are the sodium potassium pumps in your nerve cells, glucose uptake in your intestines, but also root hair cells. And those kind of examples come up within your National 5 tests and exams. So hopefully you found that useful. As always, if you have any problems, questions or queries, get in touch and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.